Welcome to Radar Radio. We are here this week with Jay Postones from Heights and his side project Tesseract. Also, I have Joe and Ash from Radar Radio, so from Radar Festival even. So, hello Joe.
Hello.
And hello Ash.
Hey.
And hi to Joe.
Hello.
So, we were looking to talk to you about how you got into drumming and how you started off in your musical career. So would you be able to talk us through at what age you started being interested in the drums and how that evolved?
Yes, I can do that. I definitely wanted to be a musician from as young an age as I can actually remember. When I was 3, I think, my third Christmas, my parents bought me a tiny little Casio keyboard that was, it was very, very small. But I just remember instantly being able to play like nursery rhymes and things on it. I just had the ear for it, I guess. I inherited that from my granddad on my dad's side, who was like a band leader in the Salvation Army. And then every couple of years, I'd get a slightly bigger keyboard as my hands grew or as I grew, and that progressed quickly onto me wanting to kind of, I think I always wanted to be a drummer, but I never really, how do you ask for a drum kit, you know what I mean, because drums are like the loudest possible instrument that you can play. But anyway, one day I was in a band in school. I'd have been about 12, 13, and it was me, my mate Steve, a chap called Dan playing bass, and we were like the only band in school, and we'd just play Nirvana, Oasis, whatever Steve knew. I didn't really know much music, to be honest, other than what my dad was listening to. And Steve introduced me to all these new bands. I was playing keyboards, he was playing guitar, Dan was playing bass, and there was this old Premier gold sparkle drum kit, like a 70s drum kit, in the music room. And the teacher had left the drumsticks out, which was great. So Steve looked at me and was like, we don't really need a keyboard player, and we can't hear you anyway, because we only ever used the speakers that were like built into this keyboard. It was never loud enough. So he said, why don't you play drums? And I was like, all right, I'll just play drums. And I sat behind this kit. It was a real basic kit. It was like 2 cymbals, like a ride cymbal, a crash, a snare, a hi-hat, although I didn't know that it was called a hi-hat. I thought the snare was called the hi-hat and the hi-hat was called the snare. And I remember he just started playing Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I just did the fill and started playing the song. It's like, oh, okay, so I kind of can play the drums. This would have been about age 12, 13 maybe. And the music teacher heard me at some point playing drums and said, oh, we need a drummer for the school concert that's coming up. And it was a Beatles tribute concert. And they had like, the school orchestra did a bunch of songs, and our band did a bunch of songs, and the choir did a bunch of songs. And I ended up playing drums for this entire concert. And I'd only practiced like the drums for the band stuff, but every now and then the teacher would look over at me and just say, oh, just start drumming. So I'd just start drumming during this concert. And it was over 2 nights. Exactly the same concert both nights, and one set of grandparents came to the first night, another set came to the second night, and after that whole thing, they kind of clubbed together and bought me my first kit, and that was like the start of it for me. It was a Honor LEX drum kit. It was a piece of shit. It was like it was one of those drum kits that it was so badly made that if you took the drum heads off, there wasn't any other drum heads that fit it, which was bizarre, because I actually bought another set of drum heads at some point to put on it, and you couldn't actually attach them, which was crazy. They weren't the wrong size, it was just they just didn't fit over with the rim, which was really weird. And the inside of them, once you took the drum head off, if you actually ran your finger around the inside, you'd have gotten splinters. It was that badly made. But you've got to start somewhere. I quickly upgraded that after about a year and a half to a Premier Artist Birch kit, which I loved, and that was the kit that really got me started, and I used that for all of the early stuff that I did in my first bands outside of school. I was in a couple of bands, like local bands in Wolverhampton, which is a lovely place. And I'm just trying to think how many bands I was in. Probably 3 or 4. I got booted out of my own band, which broke my heart. That sucked. But yeah, I just wanted to play drums. I was just obsessed. That was my like absolute passion from late or kind of middle school into high school, and then through to my kind of late teens, early 20s. It was just, I've just got to play drums, and everything else that I did was a side project. My day job, I was working in the civil service. That was absolutely an afterthought. That was a consideration. That was something I had to do to make money, to go and spend my entire paycheck down the road at Sound Control in Birmingham, where I could finally afford Sabian cymbals, and I could finally afford, new drums and drum heads and guitar amps and things. So I wanted to play guitar as well. So that's really where it all started. I've got my dad to thank for a lot of it as well, because he introduced me to the first song that I heard that made me want to play drums, which was Asia by Steely Dan. We were on holiday in France in a place called Jard-sur-Mer, and I was sat in the car, and he put it on, and I just remember being like, man, it's Steve Gaddy's the drummer on that track, by the way, and they used his second ever take as the performance on that track, and it's like a 7-8 minute song, and the drums aren't easy, and it's just amazing. But I heard the solos on that. I'm like, yep, that's it. I've just decided I'm being a drummer, and there's been no other option for me. I think I'd always be trying to be a drummer if I wasn't lucky enough to be in the position I am with Tess and stuff now.
Can you play anything else out of interest, or is it just drums?
Drums and pipe organ. Actually, no, that's a lie. I could play guitar a little bit. I used to be in a band called Araya before Tess, and it was actually that band that led me to Tesseract. I ended up meeting Ackle at South Hill Park, of all places, in Bracknell, because of Araya. But that's another story. And I used to play guitar and write a lot of this stuff for Araya, or at least Araya's later material. But when I joined Tess, like Ackle and James were both way better guitarists than me, and I had no interest in trying to write guitar riffs for Tesseract because Ackle's stuff was so far beyond what I was doing that I just thought, nah, I'm just going to focus on drums now. That is my job. But I'd like to be able to play piano. I think if I was gonna like pick another instrument and start doing something now, it'd definitely be piano, because I like how it sounds. I'd like to be able to just meander. When you see people like at train stations just playing lovely piano music, I'd like to be one of those guys. But if I did it now, people would leave the train station and probably kill me.
That's actually a similar thing that's happened to me earlier this year. Well, actually, just late last year, I was at a bus station or a train station. I saw someone playing piano, and it made me actually want to go out and start getting lessons and pick up a little keyboard and understand music and melody, especially from a slightly different perspective. Yeah. And I mean, so far that hasn't been going too well because of lockdown. I haven't been able to have my lessons in person, and I definitely learn more by being shown.
Yes.
But you mentioned Steve Gadd was an influence to you growing up, but do you have any more recent influences now in terms of your writing, what you bring to Tesseract?
Yeah, I guess so. More modern drummers basically the guys that I tour with, if I'm being honest. I've never really been one of those guys that knows all the drummers and is obsessed with all the other drummers. If there's some drummers that know everyone and they know what everyone has played on and they follow the careers of other drummers. And a couple of years ago I played the UK drum show, which was a massive deal for me. It was hugely nerve-wracking doing something like that. But I went to like the DW dinner with all these crazy drummers, like the dudes that have played with Michael Jackson and like literal drum legends, studio guys, and everyone knew everyone. And I'm just like this guy sat at this table like a plum, I'd got the drummer from Elbow to my right and Katy Perry's drummer to my left, and we're just chatting about all kinds of shit. But I felt massively out of place somewhere like that because they all knew each other. They'd all done stuff in studios together, and it was very bizarre being like the prog guy, the new kid. But modern drummers that I'd say are like current influences, or that at least influence my playing as I've grown as a drummer. Steph Brox from Textures, he is phenomenal. And that band never got big enough, in my opinion. They were ahead of their time in terms of what they were doing. Yeah, he's absolutely phenomenal. And I can remember them playing at Milton Keynes Pits Club when it was still there. Tesseract were supporting them. And I just remember being a little bit bold, and we didn't know the guys at this point, and I just snuck backstage into their dressing room after they'd finished and sat down, expecting Steph to be like, "Who the fuck are you? Get out." And he didn't. He was just like, "Oh, hey man, you're a drummer from Tesseract. Yeah man, sit down." And it was just me and him chatting for like 10-20 minutes. And it was so good, because it was like it just burst that bubble of, it was one of those first instances that literally bursts the bubble of the music industry in a good way, where you're just like, these people are actually just humans and they didn't have egos, and it was really, really nice. But yeah, definitely Steph. Earlier than that even, I'd say Dan Ford from Sixth. He was an influence for a while. Around Sixth's first album and their first couple of EPs, I used to listen to them a lot. And when the first Sixth album came out, I remember sitting and listening to it through my dad's stereo, and just being like, these are literally the drums that I would write over this if I was sat behind a kit and I could compose this. Like, that is the type of fill that I do there. It's like, oh my god, it's exactly how I heard it if I was writing it. But he was doing it much more accomplished than I could have at the time, for sure. Gareth Grover as well, drummer from Aconite Thrill, who randomly, this is so random, he dropped a message on something I posted on Instagram the other day, and I didn't even know that he was connected with me on Instagram. And then he commented on something. Then I commented saying, "Oh man, hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. How's it going?" And he sent me a message like, "Yeah man, not bad," and kind of, "Who are you?" kind of thing. And I had to tell him that, oh well, you guys as Aconite Thrill actually stayed over at my parents' house when you were on tour after you'd played Scruffy Murphy's in Birmingham in like 2001 or 2 or something. And I called you up when I was trying to get into drum tech in Acton, and we've got a couple of mutual friends, and he was like, "Holy shit, yes, I completely remember." And we just had like this really cool back and forth from almost 20 years ago. It was really, really cool. But he was a fantastic drummer and still is, and I don't know who he plays for now. He was playing for Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes, but he's not playing with them now. I don't know who he's playing for, but he's amazing. Man, who else? I guess Jose from Incubus. I used to be obsessed with that band, and his drumming was fantastic. Thomas from Meshuggah, Thomas Hark, absolutely incredible drummer, and again, super down to earth dude. We were fortunate enough to tour with Meshuggah a couple of years ago, and he's one of those guys that I'm just like, I wouldn't, because of being a fanboy, I wouldn't have gone up to him and be like, "Hey man," like, because I wouldn't have had anything to say without looking like a giant plum. So I was just very fortunate that he was a lovely bloke and very, very chill, and yeah, it was an amazing thing to be able to watch him every night do his thing. But he's a huge influence. I owe him my ability to keep my left leg going constantly while I'm playing, because I don't know what number album it is. Nothing, I think, is the name of the album. But I used to listen to that all the time and just keep my left leg going on the pedal hat non-stop for like a couple of years. I just listened to it on my way to work, on my way back from work, on my lunch breaks. And that kind of trained me in being able to hear weird patterns over longer time periods, and hearing where they repeat in relation to a 4 or a 3 or a 6 or whatever I'm counting that's supposed to be the pulse that everyone else hears. So I've got a lot to owe him, sorry. And Ackle, if I'm being honest, the main writer in Tesseract, like he writes some things that drummers would simply not think of, but are incredibly groovy and possible to play, but require a lot of new techniques to be learned. I've actually learned a lot from just listening to his program drums, and then trying to humanize them. So yeah, Ackle's early demos before I joined Tesseract, like they were insane. The first time I heard anything that he did, it's like those are the type of drums I want to play. And I didn't even realize at the time that it wasn't a drummer. I thought it was. I didn't know what the Toontrack Superior Drummer software. I didn't know what any of that was. Didn't realize that he was using it, and I thought it was a real drummer. And then when I found out it wasn't, I'm like, let me in the damn band, which took a little longer than that to actually work.
So did you bring in your left foot hi-hat technique into that hearing following that, or was that something Ackle brought in as well?
I was doing that in Araya because I'd been listening to Meshuggah for ages, and it was just something that became a required part of my playing. If I'm not doing that, I feel as though something's missing from what I'm doing, and it actually helps me. Like it might sound weird because you're doing an extra thing, but it's a metronome for me. It's helping me, especially during slower songs or slower parts. The ghost notes which are tiny little notes on the snare drum for anyone that isn't a drummer. Ghost notes and pedal hat work is the stuff that helps me get to the next accent or the next beat. It's kind of bridging that gap.
I think it's quite prevalent in Juno, actually, isn't it?
I mean, Juno, pretty much every test song, there's a lot of stuff going on that is, it's very low dynamics. It's, very, very quiet in the mix. But if you took everything else out and you listen to just the drum mix, it's incredibly busy. There's so much going on that is really, really, really subtle and quiet. But I just really enjoy playing like that, because it enables me to play 16th notes over everything, but you're hearing quarter notes kind of thing. That's just a technique that I utilize quite a bit. Yeah, I can't think of any of the drummers. I suppose the obvious ones from modern day drummers, guys like Matt Garsker, Matt Halpern, like Blake from Between the Buried and Me, Blake Richardson. Those are the guys who I've toured with who have been like, damn, like, yeah, you guys can play. Yeah.
So would you be able to elaborate on your times in Bracknell and how that ended with you joining Tesseract and how that all came about?
Yes. Oh, wow. This is a story. I'm just trying to think how far back I can go. So I was playing in Araya. Araya was made up of a chap called Ali McCabe, and who was actually drumming he was the guitarist in Araya, and he was playing drums in a band called Pilot Passenger that was basically the guys that are in Heights. It was Al and John from Heights, and a chap called Tim singing, who was a fantastic vocalist. And Ali joined Pilot Passenger with the aim of stealing Tim for Araya. so he joined on the drums because we needed a vocalist in Araya. We didn't have a vocalist, and he's like, this guy's amazing. We need to get him in Araya. And which didn't ever actually work out. He came to a couple of rehearsals and it didn't quite work out. But anyway, we'd built this rehearsal room down in Reading with Pilot Passengers, so that Araya and Pilot Passenger had a place to keep all their stuff, and it wouldn't cost that much, and it was set up all the time, and it was kind of ideal for us. There was 7 of us, so it didn't really cost more than about 50 quid a month. And through all of that, I mean, both Pilot Passenger and Araya ended up breaking up not long after we built that rehearsal room, which was a bit of a shit, but that's a different story. And I ended up, I think I'd befriended Al, the guitarist in Pilot Passenger, and he needed someone to work the door at the Cellar Bar in Bracknell at the South Hill Park. So I went down, and as when I say work the door, it sounds like I'm doing security. I'm not. I would get beaten up badly if I was doing security. I would sit on the door and put wristbands on people and check that they were 18, or if they were 18, they'd get one color, or 18 or over. If they were under 18, they get another color, and let them down into the venue. And I was doing that for probably maybe 18 months. I did that for quite a while. It was something that I did just as like I wanted to see and hang out with Al, so I'd go down there and he'd chuck us a bit of money to sit on the door, and we eventually started like wanting to be in a band together and formed Heights, which is we were talking about that a little while ago. But through doing that, I asked him a couple of times if I could pick the bands, like if I could put on make a poster and try and help promote getting some bands down there. And I put on a couple of shows with his help and with his approval that were, let me think, there was one that was Fell Silent, which is Ackle's old band with John Brown from Monuments. First Signs of Frost, which is Dan's old band. This is on the same bill, and just complete chance, really. And I think there were a local band called No Made Sense that aren't around anymore, but they were bloody brilliant.
They were so good.
And there was another one I did that was Silosis and Viatrophy, which was another local band which had members of Silosis in it. It was like interchangeable members. I can't remember who the other one was, but either way, I put on a couple of shows, and the Fell Silent gig is where I actually met Ackle. And I remember I knew Ackle because of Tesseract, because of the demos that he'd been uploading to MySpace back in the day. So that's how long ago it was. And he was stood at the back of the room while First Signs of Frost were playing, and I remember just going up and being like, I didn't introduce myself at first because I was a nervous little boy. I didn't go up and say anything. I just remember like standing kind of a few feet away from him, but like very nervously just looking straight forwards, like, oh my god, this is the guy. What do I say to him to make him like want me in Tesseract? But he'd already heard Ariah's stuff, which was quite good. So, and he knew, it wasn't straightforward drums. It was kind of complicated. But anyway, met Ackle there. We did end up actually chatting and kissing on the mouth. And no, we didn't actually end up kissing on the mouth. We met there. We had a conversation, and I said, I'd love to audition for Tesseract. And he was like, yeah, man, I'll send you some stuff. And it took a little bit more persuasion from me for him to actually send me all the stuff. But he did send me a CD of this was before you could send big files on the internet, I think. He sent me a CD of every single MP3 that he'd got, every single demo that he'd written. It was just an MP3 CD, completely full. And I stuck all that on my iPod at the time, and I just listened to it on loop. Literally just these demos, just looping them for probably a year. It was when I was working in Guildford, and I was working as a civil servant in Guildford, just listening to Tesseract all the time on my lunch breaks, kind of like I did with my sugar. I just had the same approach, just listen to this. And I, let me think, what happened then? I think I must have emailed him and said, we need to sort out a jam at some point, and he'd said we would. But that never really happened. Like, as much as we were talking online, it never actually ended up being a thing that we organised. Even though I had a rehearsal room, he lived in Milton Keynes, which isn't far away in reality, but it is when you're trying to be in a band with someone. You kind of just want to be in the same town. And I remember just by chance, I got a call at work from Ali, from Ariah, saying, hey, we've got an opportunity tonight, if you can get out of work, to support Fell Silent, who were supporting Enter Shikari at some working men's club in Luton, which is like, I mean, that says a lot, because Enter Shikari are bloody massive now, so it was a long bloody time ago. And I was like, damn, I'm supposed to be, like, I had to be there with all my stuff at like 6:30 or something to open at 7, and I'm in Guildford, so I just like bailed work. I was a PA, right? I was a personal assistant to a a fairly important civil servant, and I'm just like, see ya, and I legged it, got back from Guildford to Reading, got down to the studios, packed up my kit, got in the car, legged it over to Luton, got there just in time, set everything up. We played this show. It was like a 25-minute opening set, instrumental Araya set. And I just remember at the end of it, Ackle and John Brown, actually. Ackle and John Brown was just stood right behind me on the stage, like down these little stairs. And Ackle was like, yep, okay, we'll sort out a jam. And we did. Like, not long after that, we got together in one of my studios that I had in Reading. And a couple of weeks after that, we had a rehearsal where Amos came down. He was the second bassist we tried out. And I just remember he sent us a message afterwards saying he was really impressed with us, which was cool. Didn't really expect that kind of response. I don't know why, but he really wanted to work with us, and we wanted to work with him. And then the week after that, he brought James down. Him and James were already in a band called 209. And then the week after that, he brought Abby, who was the old vocalist from 209, who became the second vocalist in Tesseract. And that was the start of Tesseract, really. We just rehearsed every single week for about a year, and then Moss finally pulled the trigger and said, we just need to book a gig now, because otherwise we're just going to keep rehearsing. So we did, and their first gig was actually at the Cellar Bar in Bracknell, where I'd met Ackle.
So, well, what's next for Tesseract then, I guess? Fast forwarding to
now. Album 5 is next. We're working on it at the moment. You'd think that being forced to stay at home at the moment would help creativity, but it hasn't, oddly. Any musician or any artist or anyone that is in the creative field will tell you this. Creativity happens in waves. 1 minute you are absolutely stoked and you output loads of really good stuff in a really short time frame, and then you're in the dip of the wave, and there's nothing for a couple of months. And we've had a couple of months of absolutely nothing until 3-4 days ago. Ackle sends through like June 15 demo, and then 2 June 17 demos, and then June 18 demo. You're like, holy cow, like, where are all these coming from? And he's just in the zone at the moment and writing some absolute bangers. So album 5 is the next step. I'd say there's a couple of finished songs. There's probably two knocking on 3 completely finished songs, or finished demos, let's say. There's a load, absolutely loads of ideas that need fleshing out into full songs. And yeah, we're working on a concept, or rather Dan and Amos are kind of the guys that work on the concepts and the visuals for things. They've got a better vision than the rest of us. My job really is to listen, learn and humanize, and then try and rewrite the things that Ackle's coming up with to be possible on the drum kit, because some of the things he writes aren't possible. I suppose touring will be the next thing once the world reopens and it's a bit safe. We're supposed to be going to Latin America in September this year, but I mean, I personally would be very surprised if that happened, just given the world at the moment. Although people are still sending messages and stuff saying, oh my god, I can't wait to see you in Sao Paulo, and you're like, yeah, but you've seen the news, right? Like, it's not looking great. But I mean, the shows are not currently cancelled, so I don't really know what's going on. I'm waiting to hear what is going on about those. Personally, I'm not up for travelling anywhere at the moment. I just want to hole up here and it be it, but we'll see what happens. We are I think we're supposed to be going out at some point early 2021, but again, that's all going to depend on what the world can do. My honest concern with it all is what it's going to even look like for the music industry, because, you know, I mean, you guys know because of Radar Festival, the music industry stopped. It's literally stopped. Everyone that I know that was on tour, Everyone that's crew, everyone that is a lighting guy, a sound guy, a tour manager, a flipping, everyone that's doing everything, their careers have just gone. Like, and unless they've got another way of making money, it's very, very difficult at the moment for them. And I think when it does reopen eventually, I think the first things that will happen, if I was a betting man, would be festivals in the middle of next year. I think that's probably going to be the first thing. There'll be a handful of tours, but there's absolutely no way that they're going to be as busy as they would have been otherwise. There's still going to be a camp of people that are going to think this is risky and aren't going to want to be in a sweaty venue, including me. I would not go to a venue at the moment personally. I'm going to need some convincing. I'm not going to be the guinea pig to make sure that it's safe to do so. I'm certainly going to listen to the science before I make any of those decisions. But that extends to going out and playing these shows. I don't want to go and do shows yet, where there's risk to us, there's risk to our crew, and there's risk to getting a bunch of people in the same room at the same time. Masks or no masks, but anyway, I think I'd say that it'll reopen middle of next year. If I'm guessing, I don't have any insider knowledge. That's kind of what I think will probably happen, and I'd imagine even then it's probably going to be smaller numbers because people aren't going to want to come out because of what's happened. So I think we'll have to adjust, and a lot of the music industry is going to have to work out a new model of making money from what it is and from what it does.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head at the start of what you were just saying there when you're talking about flights, because if, let's say, the whole band has to, and you're based in Texas, the whole band has to get to South America, and flights are not really happening properly at the moment. That's already a massive hurdle, and the same for international travel. My gut feeling is at the start of next year, we might start to see a bit of normality.
I hope so.
Yeah, so do I. I miss gigs.
Yeah, the last gig I went to was. I don't actually go to many gigs, if I'm being honest, because I'm at them all the bloody time for my job, and the last thing you actually want to do to chill once you've been on tour is be around a shitload of noise. But I went out to see Periphery and Pliny when they came through Austin in February, I think. And that was just a really nice evening. I went there with Bailey. Bailey's my wife. And we went with a friend that I've got in Austin who is, he moderates my Twitch live streams. And it was just a really cool night. We ended up just shooting the shit, and it was good to see the Pliny guys. The crazy thing about touring and about going on tour and tours coming through the city that you live in is that it makes you realise how small the world is, because you've basically got mates all over the world, and they come into town for this one night that you're there because you live there. And it's just like you're on tour again as soon as you reconnect with these people. Like Ronnie Young was doing the sound for him, and it's like shit. I've toured with him, and immediately you're just like, oh man, this is great. It's like it was 4 or 5 months ago when we were last hanging out. You just pick up these friendships immediately, and it's so much fun. But yeah, both bands are absolutely phenomenal. Pliny is amazing. You had him scheduled to play Radar, didn't you? Or do you for next year? I can't remember.
We have Pliny for our postponed October date. The date we postponed to in October. Being totally honest and open, we are looking at next year. We haven't made a decision yet, but see what happens. I would also say it's not looking likely, and I don't think that would be a surprise to anyone listening at the same time.
Well, Pliny's so bloody good. Such a hilarious bunch of guys. Like if we had to tour with anyone forever, I think we'd pick Pliny. I think we'd pick those guys because they're just super easygoing, super chill, and they take the piss out of me all the time, which is probably the right thing to do.
I know Ronnie. Actually, Ronnie was on last week's podcast as well. Well, it will be last week's when this comes out. But
Nice.
Ronnie was telling me a story about when they toured with you, Pliny and Tesseract, where they started whispering Moss's name, and it got a bit upset.
Yeah, it's so fun. Well, I mean, Moss didn't get upset, but it's funny because they'll just go Moss, 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 and it all got like gradually louder and bigger, and like Moss just because he's a very chill, calm guy. You see like the edge of his mouth start to crack and start to smile, and then he just pisses himself laughing because it was just very funny. But they're just they're wonderful humans. I can spend a lot of time with them. Yeah.
Speaking about some other wonderful humans, you touched on it a bit earlier. Heights. So Heights is your other band, and it's obviously quite a different spectrum of music. Do you want to talk about Heights a little bit and how musically it's different?
Yeah, certainly. So Heights, it's an instrumental band. It's three of us. Myself on the drums, Al Heslop on guitar, and John Hopkins on bass. Or Hopkins, sorry, on bass. And we've been going for as long as Tesseract, which is the crazy thing. We've got 3 albums, a couple of EPs. The most recent album was put out in 2015, so it's not even that recent. But we just write music for music's sake. It was always Heights was always kind of a jam band, whereas Tesseract is more. It's written by Ackle. You know, he's the main songwriter. We all submit ideas, but Ackle is the guy that Tesseractizes everything. Heights, again, there's one main composer, which is Al, but we'd always flesh out the ideas in the rehearsal room. So we'd typically get together. It used to be at least twice a week. It was like a Tuesday and a Thursday or a Tuesday and a Friday type thing. And we would just... Al would come in with an idea and he'd start jamming it, and he had this grin on his face because he knew that he'd written something great. And we'd just start jamming, and all the songs just came out of these jams. Apart from album 3 was mostly written in the studio, so we took a little over a week to write album 3. Which is called Fantasia on the High Processions of Sun, Moon, and Countless Stars Above, because why not? And Al had got all of these ideas. I'd heard some of them, like I'd heard rough demos of them, just little sketches. And we went into his studio in Bracknell and just recorded everything a bit at a time. Like instead of sitting down and working out what's going on here, we just kind of jigsaw puzzled the whole thing together. And just wrote it a chunk at a time, with me not really knowing if I could play these, one part going into the next part kind of thing. So I had to slightly change some things when we played them live. But it was a really nice way to write, and it was a really cool, just a really cool time that we had in that studio. But yeah, what else is to say about Heights? We haven't really done much in a while because of life and living an ocean apart now. But there are a fairly decent handful of demos that we've not done anything with that I'd say would form at least half of an album. And every month or every 6 weeks or so, the conversation between us three will like get a little kick up the arse on Facebook, and someone will drop something in there that's like, oh, I had a little jam over this the other day, or Al will casually drop some of the lovely guitar riff in that he's written, and we end up again inspired to just like start jamming and doing something. But it's so difficult because we're not in the same room. Like it's a different formula that we'd have to work to now, and we've never worked like that. But I would think there will be some new music at some point. It's not a priority for anyone at the moment, which is a shame, but also just a product of life. But that being said, I'm doing a live stream tonight on Twitch, and I'm going to be writing drums over a song, an unreleased Heights song that doesn't have drums on it. So something is happening. But yeah, we're just not all on the same page about what that is.
Good timing as well, because we were just about to ask you to elaborate on what you've been doing in lockdown, and I know what the answer is because you've just explained anyway, but would you be able to talk us through Twitch, how you've been setting that up, and if that's the direction of how you are keeping sort of your income going in music during this lockdown period?
Yeah, sure. So basically, what's been going on since the industry stopped and since touring has stopped is I've been doing live streams on Twitch. Twitch is typically it's a streaming platform for gamers, or at least that's how it started out. And I actually started out 11 months ago when I was in US visa limbo. I was staying in my uncle's house, my uncle's spare house in Penkridge in the UK. And I was just streaming PlayStation, me playing PlayStation, because that's what people do. And it actually started to grow quite quickly, which is odd, because why does anyone give a shit about me playing PlayStation? But I guess being the drummer in Tesseract carries a little bit of weight. And but yeah, people started tuning in. So when I moved over to here, over to the US finally, I got my my visa and green card. I started to take things a little bit more seriously and invested in a Roland TD50 KV, which is a kind of mega electronic drum kit. And I've just been piecing together this live streaming setup, which has now expanded to a streaming machine, like a big PC, an audio machine, which is a separate PC, a million screens that are around me, so I can see what I need to when I need to. All these cameras, like it gets ridiculous and it gets a little bit pricey, but it's really good fun. It's really fun and creative, and the community that grows around it is really kind, really supportive, and they've just embraced it, and I've embraced it. It's not something I ever really thought of. It's just happened organically, but it's the thing that I enjoy doing the most at the moment. And a normal stream for me either consists of me jamming through Tesseract songs or a Tesseract set. I started out with a live set that we took from a show that we did in Greece last year. Took the live audio from that, and I just played drums over it, but I kind of mute the drums that are in the mix, so it's just live drums that you're hearing. I do the occasional charity stream as well, which those have all been massively, well, I'll say massively successful, relatively successful, but it's really amazing to see the support that a community like that shows when you say you're doing a charity stream. I did one the other night, and we played through all of One, all of Altered State, and all of Polaris, which I've never done. We know Tesseract has never played through any of these albums, and I realised, hey, I've actually played all of these songs on streams now, so why don't I just do whole album streams? But we do song request streams as well, where people get to come in and drop, that you type !SR in the chat, and then the song that you want, or the artist and the song, and it drops it into a list, and eventually I get to play that song, and it's been amazing, and it's formed because people subscribe to it. People subscribe and they drop tips and things like that. It's actually formed the main chunk of my income over here in the US now. It's a combination of that and drum lessons, the two things that I spend my time doing when I'm not in my hammock or pool, and it's not a bad way to spend your time.
So is that something that you think you'll continue doing once lockdown is over, and juggle it around tours and sort of adapt it to being on the road?
Yeah, yes is the answer. The thing that will be difficult to do on tour will be drum lessons with the students that I've got, but I'll navigate that somehow. Definitely, it's something that I would do on tour. And in fact, the second machine that I just bought, the laptop, it's basically a mirror image of my streaming machine. So I can take that on tour, and as long as I've got a capable internet connection, which I'm guessing I can just get a 4G, 5G dongle type thing, I'll be able to do live streams from anywhere. So I can set up a couple of cameras, I can get a board mix into my interface, and I can stream live drum performances every night, and live interviews with people that we're on tour with, and that kind of thing. I'm yet to discover what it is that I'll do when I go on tour that's going to be streamed, but 100% I will be streaming when I'm on tour. I don't want it to drop off, if that makes sense. Because I'm so regular with it. I mean, I do 10 streams a week at the moment, and they're all at regular times at the moment too. I don't want to lose that momentum by stopping for a month because I'm on tour, and I think a lot of people that do tune in they'd probably stop tuning in if I didn't do it for a month. And also it's kind of exciting to push yourself to do something you haven't done before. Like that's something that I kind of live by. If I'm just treading water, what's the point? Like I've got to be doing something that's next leveling some aspect of what I'm working on. I've got to be next leveling it, otherwise I'm bored, and it's very easy to get into your own brain if you're bored.
Talking about touring, obviously you've done everything from sitting in a small splitter van to nowadays where you guys are on a bus. Also, one thing I really like actually, which you do, is your tour videos, where you put a whole tour into a few videos. I always think it's really interesting. But could you sort of talk about what it's like nowadays on tour? I mean, obviously there's the caveat that everyone thinks it's awesome, but then you have moments like when your bus broke down in France, or there was that bit where you had to get a bus, then fly, then another bus or something in Scandinavia.
Yeah. Touring is man, there's so much I could say about touring. Sometimes it's incredible, and sometimes it's absolutely crushing. You go from the highest highs to the lowest lows. It requires so much time and so much energy, and it's not what you think it is. It's not what the rest of the world thinks it is, unless you're touring at the highest level, and by the highest level I mean Beyonce or someone like that. It's not a comfortable experience, and even for her, she'd probably say, no, it sucks. And I'm going to start out with the negatives and then try and go to the positives, because I am. It was much easier when we were younger to do it, because we had more energy and more enthusiasm for the traveling aspect of it. Traveling really is what zaps it for you, because especially when you're touring around the European festivals, even if you're in a bus, you end up doing a few nights on the bus and then hopping on a plane and doing it somewhere else. Having to get on a plane the next day immediately after playing a show at like midnight. You have to be at the airport for 6 a.m. so you're not getting any sleep after that show, which immediately cripples someone. As soon as you're not 20, you can't really do that. So the entirety of like our last summer European experience for me was just, this is the worst. Even though we're playing these incredible shows and we are, we're getting higher and higher up the bill, the toll it took on my physical and mental well-being was just not worth it, in my opinion. It was so hard. We would regularly have to, finish a show quite late in one part of the world and then be on a flight away. We'd be on stage the next day at 2-3 p.m. So you're literally not sleeping unless you can sleep on a plane. And this was day after day after day. We'd have hotels booked, but the lobby call would be 2 hours after we get there. So you're like, we're literally stopping here for a shower. Like, we're stopping here for a shower and maybe 40 minutes of shut-eye if you can get it. And if you know that you've only got 40 minutes of sleep, you don't sleep. So that really got to me, to the point that we were flying to, where were we flying to? Israel. We were flying to Israel. And I got on the plane. We'd done like 2 or 3 days in a row of no sleep and shows. I got on the plane, sat down, and I looked at my touring. One of the crew guys was sat next to me, and I was like, oh, I feel weird. And I thought, because I've had a period in my life where I went through panic attacks. I thought I'm having like a panic attack or something here. This is crazy. But it wasn't. It wasn't. I was literally just passing out, but sat down in a plane seat. And it wasn't. The plane was on the tarmac. It hadn't moved. People were still like loading their bags in, but I was just so exhausted. And I was like, "You're gonna have to get some help." And I like tapped him, but at the point of tapping him, I just dropped all of my stuff and like slumped in my seat and was completely out. And they called paramedics on, made sure I was okay. Asked where I was going, and I knew where I was going. And all the test guys were like, "What the fuck?" And I just knew I needed to lie down. I literally had to lie down. I couldn't like support my body anymore, just from exhaustion from doing this. And that's realistically what touring is when you're doing the festival circuit, because the folks that book these things, they do a fantastic job. They get you the best possible deals you can, and the best fees that you can get from festivals, but they don't consider or have a knowledge of the logistics that go into booking these things. So they'll book you in a show. You might have to get from Ireland to Helsinki to Germany to Italy, and it's like a couple of days apart. And the only way to do that is on flights, and you're then absolutely knackered. So that's the aspect of it that I can't deal with. And I also hate airports because I've been to all of them and they suck. But what is amazing is seeing the places and the crowds, and I mean, I can genuinely say I've travelled the world, and music has taken me there, and it's not really cost me anything to travel the world, and I don't know anyone that can really say that, other than other musicians. You're on tour with your friends and family, and you do have genuinely incredible experiences. We've done some things that I would never have experienced had it not been for music. Playing. We went up to Lapland and played this crazy show for Jägermeister called the Ice Cold Gig, and it was us playing on top of a igloo, literally this massive like 30-foot igloo underneath the Northern Lights. And you're like, okay, who gets to do that? Went to Mexico a few years ago, and like the director for civil protection for Monterey met us at the airport, and we're like, damn, is it like a really dangerous place? What's going on? But it turns out that he was just a huge fan of the band. And he has like control of the city and access to all of the resources that he has. So he just arranged for a helicopter to meet us. And he took us off on like this tour of the city up these mountains and stuff in his personal helicopter. And you're like, what the fuck? Like,
no way.
Stuff like that is absolutely ridiculous. And you also just meet people on tour that certain people come out to certain shows, and you just end up making friendships with them and stay in touch with them. And I don't know what suddenly qualifies someone for them to cross that bridge of being a fan to being a fan and a friend. But there are certainly people that have crossed that bridge, and that's really nice that we've literally just got friends around the world that I'm still in contact with on Facebook, and I've got phone numbers of, and that kind of thing. And it's a really amazing thing to do, to play music to people. I'll never get tired of that. Even playing the same songs, I don't get tired of playing the same songs. I don't know. It's magical. I don't know how else to describe it, but yes, I could. I love touring. I hate traveling. I think that's probably the best way of describing it. I love being on tour, but I hate going to airports and dealing with all that, because it's so knackering. The other difficult thing, of course, is being away from your family, because it's not just difficult for me to go away and leave my wife for that amount of time. And I mean, the other guys are leaving behind kids as well. They're going on tour. They got young kids. That's incredibly difficult. I can't even imagine that. Like Dan and James have both gone on tour when they've had a kid who's not even one. And you can't imagine being away for 6, sometimes 8 weeks and not seeing your new baby for that amount of time. I can't imagine that. That must just be so difficult. But they both did it in the early days of Tesseract. So yeah. Bless him.
What would you say has been your favourite show to date? But also, what show? What was the show that kind of made you realise that, for lack of a better phrase, you finally made it? Because obviously, at the back of the stage, behind a kit, you're potentially less involved, but it is still fun, as you said, playing to people night after night. Yeah. So what about those two shows?
The first show that made me feel as though this is something was probably the first time we played Sonisphere Festival. We played the Red Bull stage, and we were on I think it was just after or before Rolo Tomasi. I don't know who was. It was just before Rolo Tomasi. It was kind of a early afternoon set, and I just remember it was before really we thought we'd got that much of a following. We'd done a handful of European shows. Certainly nothing you'd call a tour. We called it a tour for the sake of the internet, but it was not a tour. It was like a long weekend of shows kind of thing, because we were all working. But yeah, the first time we played Sonisphere Festival, it was in a tent. It was probably, I don't know, 1,000 capacity, maybe 1,000 capacity tent at a push. And when we started, they had to close off access to the tent because it was so rammed, and it was the tent, and it spilled outside of the two entrances to this tent. And that was completely unexpected. I was like, holy cow, people actually want to see us. That was a really big crowd at the time. It seemed crazy. That was Dan's last gig with us before he left. His last UK gig with us, sorry. His last actual show was in the US. But it was his last UK show with us. And we were like, man, it's getting somewhere already. And then the next show that made me feel as though we're actually getting somewhere was when we played Sonisphere Festival. The next time we opened the main stage, which was Dan's his first show back with us when he rejoined, was Sonisphere Festival. And we opened the main stage on the Iron Maiden day. But that was a really stressful gig, because we were told to get there for 6 a.m, which we did, absolutely knackered. But yeah, we were going on stage at 11:45, I think. So literally the like hangover band, and Iron Maiden were like setting up pyro and testing all their shit on stage. Well, they weren't personally, but their crew were, and we had to just get all our stuff as set up as we could off stage in the mud. And we had 15 minutes to throw it on stage, test it, line check, and be ready. And we can do that, but man, it's super stressful, especially at Sonisphere Festival. We weren't as streamlined as we are now, and we did it. We threw everything up, but man, we didn't have time to change out of the clothes that we'd arrived there in. So like, Amos is like wearing his like pajama bottoms or something stupid, and his shirt, just like a khaki coloured shirt thing, and I'm wearing, I don't even know what I'm wearing, just crap. We don't even look like we should be on stage. And I remember our manager having a word with us afterwards, like, guys, you need to change. And like Moss just exploded out. I'm like, dude, you got no fucking idea what just happened. Like we literally we didn't have time to change. We're just throwing stuff on, and like the whistle blew, and it's like, right, go, we got to play right now. That was the stressful gig, but it was Sonisphere main stage, which seemed massive. Like the crowd was absolutely massive. Download Festival as well. That felt huge. That was I don't know if it was main stage, but it was a bloody big stage. Just like sea of heads. I mean, to be honest, any festival where people disappear into the horizon, any of those make you feel like, oh shit, okay, this is good. And I mean, my eyesight's a little bit shit without my glasses anyway, so it just looks like a blur anyway. So it doesn't actually make a difference whether it's not a million people, like 10,000 people or 10. I don't really mind. I'm going to play the same. But I guess London shows as well. It's not like there's one show that made me feel like this is going somewhere. It's just it's good to be able to see the progression. That's always been the important thing for me, because when you're on the inside of something like this, it's very difficult to get a perspective of like where you are on the ladder, because we've done it from the ground up kind of thing. And when we played Scala and we sold out Scala, that was like, wow, that actually feels like a pretty big deal. And then we did Coco and we sold that out, and that seemed like a massive deal. And then we did Shepherd's Bush and we sold that out, and you're like, holy cow, like, yeah, this is crazy. It's properly crazy. But it also totally normalizes when you're on the inside of it. Like, it's just, we're a bunch of idiots that live in the same bus for a while, and you know what everyone's farts sound and smell like. It's we just that's literally it. There's behind the closed doors, there's no magic. I could burst the bubble of this very quickly for everyone by putting up a webcam and live streaming it on tour, but I won't do that. There's a little bit of magic to be had still.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you weren't really kind of into following all the drummers and that thing, but actually I am a little, and wanted to let you talk about some of the gear that you use, and I guess what your favourite part of your kit is. I'm assuming it's probably going to be the hi-hat. I'm doing the left foot thing again, but yeah, I mean, there's some interesting fills on all the albums. There's, tonally, there's drum textures, I think, that aren't used enough in the subgenre. So yeah, if you could talk us through a bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So, full disclosure, the first Tesseract record is real drums in a studio. Everything else after that has been clicked in with a mouse. So, the drum sounds that you're hearing are Toontrack's Superior Drummer 3 and the various libraries that you can buy as an add-on to that. So, what happens is with the first record, you end up having all the time in the world to write it. And then with every record after that, you have a couple of years to write it with lots of touring in between. So we don't actually have as much time. But anyway, just because some people don't realise that, I just thought I'd clear that up. I still get questions from people saying, oh my God, I can't believe you did that on that album. How did you play that? It's like, well, I didn't. It got clicked in. And now I try and humanise it and play it live. Drum stuff, though. What's the favourite part of my kit?
What is your? I guess what's your main setup for those that don't know?
Oh, okay. My main setup. So I've got two setups. I play DW drums. I've got a 3-up, 1 down configuration with toms. So 8, 10, 12 up, and then 18 down, because I just want it to be a big fat rumbling extension of a kick
pretty
drum,
basic.
basically. Yeah, it's great though. Super good. 22 kick. And then snare drum, I used to play a Brady snare, which was fantastic. But when I started working with DW, I discovered their brass snare, which is just amazing. And I've now got 4 of them, I think, which is stupid, but only because I'll have one on stage and a backup, because that's the main thing. If that goes and the only backup snare is another band's snare or a festival snare or something, it's not good. So yeah, I travel with my snare. That's the one thing that travels with me when I'm flying somewhere before anything else. My cymbals, I play Sabian cymbals. I'm currently using the 15 artisan hats, which are absolutely beautiful. I can't remember the entire setup because I change it around so often, but the 21 Holy China's been there for ages. The 21 Raw Bell Dry Ride's been there for ages. Both of those are hand hammered. The Volt crashes are good, but they've stopped doing that now because I think they changed it to something else. But yeah, Sabian, the HHX, the artisan stuff, all of that is just lush. You can't really go wrong with any of that, apart from it's going to sting your wallet a little bit. Veta drumsticks, because they're very kind to me. And they put my signature on some sticks recently, which was very nice. Evans drum heads, I use G2s on the top, G1s on the bottom. EQ3 on the kick, and then Power Center on the snare. That's all very geeky drum stuff.
Would you say you're
and
a
then
collector,
at home,
or is it more kind of trying things out to, on the eternal hunt for the perfect sound?
I'm definitely not a collector. Okay. I get rid of things. I can't stand having clutter. So much so that I bought the kit of my dreams when I was in the UK about 2 years ago, and I sold it a year ago. I bought it from DW, and I waited 9 months for this thing to get built and shipped. And it arrived. I did one tour with it. Didn't want to take it out because it was too beautiful, and then I didn't want to try and ship it to the US when I moved here. But if I had, I would have just had it in storage here. I haven't got any way. My current living situation in the US is I'm renting, so I've got this Roland TD50 kit here, which I've made as close to my acoustic setup as possible, and it's perfect on playing drums way more now because it's more compact. It feels more like a real kit because everything's kind of the same size as a real kit. It's a little bit smaller, but 14-inch snare, 10 and 12-inch tom pads all the way around, 18-inch crash like rides and things. So it's a decent size electric kit. So yeah, I'm definitely not a collector. And I also sold all of the snares that I had. I had a Black Beauty. I had a couple that Crush had given me. I had the Brady, and I just was like, why am I holding on to these? Because I'm not using them live. I don't need them. So when I moved to the US, I sold them as well. Not because it's nice to have these things, but why not just let them get used by someone else, or put them in a studio or something? I didn't have that studio to use, so let's sell them. If I need to get something like that in the future, I can get something like that. I'm working with a drum company, for God's sake. I'm working with DW, so if there isn't a snare drum in their massive collection of drums that they have that I can use, then something's wrong with the world. Fortunately, their brass snare is just a dream. I don't think I'll change that because the 14 by 6.5, it's so good. But yeah, my home kit is electric kit. My live kit is DW, and it's not even high end DW now. I use the DW Design Series kits because they're acrylic and they look and sound fantastic for the money. It's it's a half to maybe a third the cost of a collector's kit, and it sounds and looks brilliant. You can't really fault it. You don't mind too much if a kit of that price, especially. Test pays for the touring kit, fortunately, but the DW kit, even artist price on one of them is going to set you back a few grand. And when a sound guy drags an XLR cable over it and scratches the lacquer, you're like, oh, I'm going to murder you. But with the acrylic kit, it doesn't really happen. You can be a little bit more rough and tumble with it.
And I guess that's probably what you need on tour as well, when you're tired and trying to carry stuff up and down stairs and things like that out of the bus or whatever. I guess you probably don't want to be too worried about damage transit.
Yeah, we're fortunate now that I haven't toured with a drum tech ever, but I'll help take my drums down and set them up. But it all pretty much gets carried in and out of venues for us now, which is because we pay crew to come and do that kind of stuff for us, which on one hand, because we've done it for every year apart from the last year, makes you feel like a bit of a diva. There comes a point where you're like, well, actually, all of these things that we're carrying that have metal edges and are heavy, it's like we actually kind of need to be careful of our fingers because we use these every single day. If I'm carrying something that weighs 20, 30 kilos and I'm about to walk into a bloody wall or something that I can't see, because the amount of time something's dropped on someone's foot, or you literally sliced your finger open carrying something, it's like, nah, not even going to risk that now. So we have crew that risk their limbs and fingers for us instead.
Well, I think on that pleasant note of you saying about your crew, we'll probably wrap it up there. So thank you very much for all your insights, and on a personal level, that's probably the most mature conversation we've had during lockdown, so thank you for that.
That's okay. Yeah, I haven't threatened anything horrible.
No,
I think she's just disconnected us. Oh no, you're still there. I just
No,
heard
to give
a
it
noise.
context so that you don't sound awful, we are actually very close friends outside of Radar and Tesseract, but you do have a tendency to be quite threatening when you want to be in a jovial manner.
No, be nice. You can't say threatening. You can't say I'm threatening. I've been very drunk with you at some festivals and may or may not have threatened to push you in a fire, but it wasn't a real fire. It was a fictional fire.
It was. That's very true.
I have to say, threatening is quite the character assassination, right?
Yeah, I'd also counteract that with you're one of my best friends, and you wouldn't be if you were a complete arse to me all the time. So, yeah.
All the time. Just some of the time.
In terms of wrapping up, would you be able to give people details of where they can find you in terms of things like your Twitch streams and so on, so that they can see what you're doing?
Yes. You can find me on Twitch, which is my streaming platform, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays and Saturdays, 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's 6 hours behind UK time, so it's 2 p.m.
It's 4 and 11. No, it's 4 and 11.
4 and 11. Oh yeah, I got it wrong.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, 10. No, 2. Yes, you're right. It's 4 and 11. See, I can't even do basic math, and I call myself a drummer. So yeah, 4 and 11 UK time. Twitch.tv/JPostones. That's where you can find me. I am on Instagram because everyone is just JPostones, JAYPOSTONES, and I don't go on Facebook anymore because I don't. But or Twitter really. I'm connected to those, but I never see the messages. I do drum lessons as well. If you want a drum lesson, if you go to patreon.com/JPostonesDrums, there's a load of video lessons that are up there as well that you can access. There's 2 tiers on there. One's $10 a month and one's $50 a month, and the $50 a month gets you a 30-minute one-on-one with me every month. Or you can just email jpostonesdrums@gmail.com. That's my drum contact email address if you want to get in touch about lessons or anything really. I'll try and respond using that. All in one place is easier than all over the bloody place. And that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for talking to us. So that's goodbye from me, Catherine. Goodbye from Joe.
Goodbye.
And goodbye from Ash.
Bye.
Bye.